seek to serve, right? Validate the other person. At the end of the day, every human being's deep, deep desire is to be seen.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are getting great value, we want to hear from you. Leave us honest feedback, a rating, and review. And if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. Make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Steve Trang. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Steve Trang is the founder of the Real Estate Disruptors Movement. Now, he started the Real Estate Disruptors podcast in the middle of 2018 to inspire wholesalers and real estate agents to double their income by adding a second leg to their business. Now, the podcast has now grown over $100,000 per month, with new members of the community sharing their success story every single week. Let's welcome to the show, Steve Trang.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Hey, Steve, great to have you on. I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah. So I'm your probably typical entrepreneur, massive shiny object syndrome. So if it's in real estate, I've dabbled in one way or another. So I've been a realtor, I had a brokerage, I've wholesaled, I've flipped, I own a piece of an apartment complex, I own a piece of a bank, basically anything, or a title company. I've been involved in mortgages. So basically, the only thing I haven't gotten into is property management. Everyone in that industry seems really stressed. Um, that's the only thing I won't touch. But yeah, I mean, again, massive shiny object syndrome. I've done just about everything you can do in real estate.
I love it, man. Let's talk about the beginning. Like, what got you into real estate? What were you doing kind of before you got that itch and got the bug to get into real estate?
Yeah, so I was an engineer. So I have a master's degree in electrical engineering. Went down the whole 9 to 5, or get good grades, get a degree, get a good job, did all that stuff, right? And worked at Intel for 3.5 years. It was a great job. Wish I could have given it to somebody else, but it just wasn't for me. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, like many of the people of close to my age, and not like the new people that are getting in through Instagram and YouTube, but through Kiyosaki. And so in picking up that book, you realize like, oh, there's another way to create wealth. Or if nothing else, there's another way to pay your bills, right? With the freedom number. And once I knew there was another way, I already knew I wasn't gonna stay a W-2 employee forever. I just didn't know what my future was gonna hold. And so that book really gave me a big kick, big boost in the right direction.
I love it, man. So we're at that. So you're in the engineering space, right? Master's
Mhm.
degree in electrical engineer. Great job.
Yeah.
Sounds like you enjoyed it, but you ultimately realized, hey, I want to find that financial freedom, and you turned to real estate after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I know you kind of started helping a lot of other people learn about wholesaling. Was that kind of your
Mhm.
first foray into real estate?
No, my first foray was so buying rental properties, right? And then after that, meeting a realtor as I'm buying rental properties, and then that's where I got distracted, and I considered, I lost 9 years of my journey, doing realtor stuff, doing broker stuff, and so on. Because the book says to buy rental properties and get cash flow. It doesn't say to become a licensed realtor, which is where I screwed up, right? So I met a realtor. I was like, "What do you do?" I talked to people. What do you make? I make 6 figures easily. I was like, "Oh, well, that's more than I'm making at Intel." And I can talk to people. Turns out I wasn't that good at talking to people at that time, right? Being an engineer, but I thought I could, and so I was like, I can do this. And well, being a realtor is a lot harder than anticipated, and I got into real estate in 2007, which is the worst time to get in real estate.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of trials and tribulations. But I mean, I wouldn't change it for the world.
So you spent
So
9 years down that path, right? So started with rentals, ask your real estate agent what they did, learn more. Like said, hey, I got a mouth. I can talk to people.
yeah,
You
I can
get
do
your
this.
license, you go down that path, and you said it was a little harder than you expected, not to mention the time frame jumping
Hmm.
in 2007. So I can imagine the challenges there. At what point did you start to realize there was a different path and transition kind of your I guess you weren't even investing at that point, but you had some
Yeah, it
rentals,
wasn't.
but transition your strategy.
What absolute travesty, right? My biggest regret. So when I started transitioning was I knew I had to get listings. This is around 2010 because I was listing properties for the banks. Right? Fortunately, I was able to list properties for banks and so on. But I knew that roller coaster or that ride was going to end as well. So I signed up for coaching to become a better realtor, right? And again, was that the right choice? But whatever, I'm all in here at this point. And when I joined that program, they talked about that was the first time I went from being a real estate agent to a business owner that sells real estate, right? It's a
Mhm.
different mindset shift, right? And so at that point, I learned the importance of marketing and how to find homeowners that want to sell their house. And once I learned this concept, then I really dug deep into it and I got into Google pay-per-click and I found, people that say sell my house, right? Like that's who your target audience is. And I realized once I started targeting those people, their motivation wasn't to sell their house with a real estate agent. Their house, when someone goes and Google sell my house, they're typically looking to sell their house faster. And so, with that said, I started going to appointments as a realtor, and they're like, "No, no, I want a cash offer." I was like, "No, you don't." And they said, "No, I do." I was like, "No, you don't." Like, when we list it, you're gonna walk away with 15,000 more, right? And they're like, "No, I want a cash offer now." I was like, "Okay." So I started buying these houses cash. Fortunately, my parents were able to have saved us some money in their lifetime, and so they were my cash buyers initially and we bought multiple properties that all we would do is just turn around and just list on MLS. Like we didn't even like rehab or anything, right? Like the all we did was just clean them out. And with our marketing, we ran out of money with how many houses we could buy. And so at that point, I had to start wholesaling.
Man, I love that. Let's break that down because you said something that I think is kind of profound, especially for folks when you're talking about framing up the mindset, right? So you're a real estate agent. You were struggling. You decided to get more coaching to be a better real estate agent. And you said through that coaching and through kind of that program, you made a transition from being a real estate agent to a business owner that sells real estate.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that point there. From there, you were looking at, those owners who were trying to sell their houses, right? Who were Googling sell my house. You would go to these appointments. They were more interested in selling fast and the amount of money they can make. So you
Hmm.
just started buying these properties, turning around, listing them on MLS, not doing any of the rehab, right? But you're just
No
buying them,
rehab.
maybe cleaning them up, junking them out, all right, trashing them out, and as we will
Hmm.
call it in multifamily. So trash the units, trash out the house, take all the stuff out, put it on MLS and let someone else, let another investor or homeowner come out, buy the property, and you're making profits, right? So
Yeah.
from there, you couldn't even keep up with the
Right.
demand, and you had to kind of really start wholesaling and start to kind of make this a business model. Let's go back to that phrase, right? Because I think that was really powerful. Going from a real estate agent to a business owner that sells real estate. Talk to me about that shift in the
Hmm.
perspective and what does that actually mean for you or for someone else who is maybe thinking about what they do as a real estate agent today.
Yeah, and I think it was really profound back then. I think it's more commonplace today, right? But back then it was you do everything, right? Because again, this is 2010, 2011, right? Like as a realtor, you take every inbound call, right? You put the signs on the property, you put the lock boxes on the property. Any inbound call from another agent, you take that call. Every lead that comes in, you take the call, right? Like you're making the offers, you're handling all the negotiations, you're doing the transaction coordinating, you're dealing with the escrow officer, you're dealing with the loan officer, right? Like you're managing all the people, all the processes, and all that time, what you're not doing is marketing. So you're not marketing, you're not doing follow up because you're just dealing with the mess that's in front of you, the mess that you created, the mess that you asked for. But because you're doing day-to-day activities, you can't actually go and market, right? And so it was at that time where I finally made a decision to hire an assistant. Even though I knew I had to hire an assistant, I had multiple people tell me I need to hire an assistant. I didn't because like I don't the finances don't make sense for it, right? And that was when I first learned the concept. If you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant, right? Like once they put it that way, it's like, that's a hurt to my ego. We can't do that, right? So I hired an assistant, and after hiring an assistant, that's when I started hiring or recruiting realtors to show buyers. So then I don't have to show buyers anymore. Now I'm not getting in the car to go show houses and this and that, right? And so I got an assistant to handle the paperwork. I got agents to show the properties. Then at that point, the only thing I was going to was just listing appointments. And eventually I hired other agents to take care of that as well. And then I got better at marketing. I hired agents to handle the lead intake, right? Lead comes in from us from Google or whatever. I have one agent who goes and calls the leads, schedules an appointment, and then either sends a buyer's agent if they want to look at a property, or a seller's agent if they want to list the house. And I got another person handling the paperwork. And at that point, hey, this is a business. This is not Steve running around, saying yes to 20 different people.
And the thing that's great is like, somebody listening may say, well, this is great. And I get it from a wholesaler or an agent standpoint, but, if I'm an investor. So is
Mhm.
that relevant? I would ask you to think about it the same way. If you're running around as an investor doing all the work, all the steps, everything that we're talking about here, you are your own assistant. And what Steve is talking about is for any business, right? Whether it's being an investor of real estate, property management, wholesaling, being an agent, or outside of real estate, the business principles don't change. They're the same, right? You have to have systems and processes and people in order to scale. That's where you're going to make the most money. And that's where you're going to be able to have more free time, more flexibility. And that's what you were able to do here, right? First of
Mhm.
all, repositioning it instead of saying I'm a real estate agent, I, help these deals get to closing. You said I'm a business owner. I just happen to sell real estate. How do I
Right.
structure this business? How do I put in the systems, the processes? How do I get the right people, assistants, the team members so that we can truly run this like a business? And that's something you always want to look into your own business, whether it, again, is wholesaling, being an agent, or being a multifamily investor, a syndicator. How do you scale this and run it like a business? That's going to really help you grow. So I appreciate you sharing that context of how you were able to reposition it
Yeah.
to have more explosive growth. Talk to me more about what that growth, right? So you set up everything, you got the systems now, you've repositioned your mind.
Mhm.
What comes next as far as the business and the growth and where do you sit today?
After that is the leadership component, right? Managing people, getting people to do what you paid them to do. That is not always easy. So I didn't realize that because we tend to manage the people the way that we want to be managed, more or less. And most of us are, if we made it this far, we're problem solvers, we're resourceful, and we move fast. And most of the people we hire do not fit that category. But if they did, they eventually become our competition, right? And so there's this like conundrum that you got. So until you lead people effectively, the law I was violating for the longest time was I was leading other people how I want to be led, and it took a long time to figure out how to lead other people how they want to be led. So if they're working for you, they probably need a little bit more stability. They probably need a little bit more instruction and guidance. What does success look like? When do we need this done by? How do we know that we did a good job? What are some resources I need to go access so that I can make sure I do this correctly? Like those are things I didn't convey. I would just say, hey, go take care of this particular problem. And that was it. Right. And because I'm a visionary, that's how we communicate. And man, like you just burn people out. I've burned so many good people out. They would do something, bring it back. It's like, why'd you do it that way? No, do it this way. Right. And man, just you just think about all the people that I've just ran ragged, unfortunately, because I was a terrible leader. So that was the next evolution is leadership skills.
Yeah, developing the leadership skills is obviously an important thing if you're going to scale and hire folks. So definitely some lessons learned there. Where do you sit with the portfolio today? I mean, tell me just, the wholesaling business. I know you've got a couple different interests as far as what you invest in, but
Mhm.
how are you able to scale that? What does it sit today? What are you working on?
As far as portfolio goes,
Portfolio or just, again, your focus as far as the business is
um,
concerned.
so my core focus. So if you met me even a couple of years ago, it's kind of a bit of a mess, right? Because I did everything. Because I had the brokerage still. I was still actively wholesaling and flipping. We still did some realtor stuff. We still had our title company. But today, I've actually gotten so focused that we actually let a lot of things go by the wayside.
Mm,
So we closed the brokerage. We moved everyone over the real. We closed the title company because even though it was nice, we still had to manage people. We stopped wholesaling and flipping, as a matter of fact, this year. So even though like we're still doing deals, is they're remnants of stuff from the past. We're not actively doing it. So my responsibility, I have three core responsibilities today. Um, Generating leads through content, social media, this and that, fulfilling the coaching that we've sold, right? Because we do a lot of training on sales. And then meeting with my organization, right? Meeting with other leaders to make sure that they have everything they need to do their jobs well, right? Like you kind of look at the org chart, um, and this, the audience might have heard this before, but this is something that was really, profound to me. Is if you take the org chart and you flip it upside down, like
mm.
your responsibility is to serve everyone that's, above you at that point, right? Because the way most people act, probably like 89% of the population is like, if you're beneath me on the org chart, then you report to me. You do what I need you to do, right? But we look at it upside down. John Maxwell's principles is servant leadership. So like whoever reports to me, how can I help you be successful in your role? And so that's a good amount of my time is serving the leaders that report to me.
I love it, man. Talk about servant leadership and really focusing more on the sales coaching. We kind of talked about how you got into real estate, being an agent, starting the
Mhm.
wholesaling business. We're going to come back to the sales coaching. I know one of the big transitions for you was recognizing that, hey, there are other people who need to understand how to do this as well. You launched your
Mhm.
podcast in 2018, get a ton
Yes.
of downloads on that podcast. Talk to me about launching a podcast and how you've been able to help people through that platform.
Yeah, so when I launched the podcast, it was funny. I was at a Dean Graziosi event, and they're selling this, thing about, so like people want to hear your story. Buy my course so you can learn how to tell your story, right? Um, and so while I was watching the guy speak, Brandon Burchard, which is a fantastic speaker, he was like, "Yeah, you got to tell your story. It's one of three ways. It's either through blogging, through writing a book, or having a podcast." And I already wrote a book as part of my marketing stuff, and it didn't really go anywhere. I was blogging because I was doing all my own SEO at the time as well. So on top of doing, well, the reason why I got good at PPC was because I was good at SEO, and then SEO changed, algorithm changed, and like all my SEO efforts went out the window. So I said, to hell with that. We're not doing that anymore. So all I did was PPC. So I did when he said like, have a podcast, I was like, okay, I'll start a podcast. And that was like on a Saturday. And I was like, all right, I'm starting a podcast. The Wednesday after I announced to everyone on Facebook live, I was like, hey, I'm doing a podcast next week. Tune in. I didn't have a title. I didn't have a guest. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. All I said was, there's going to be a podcast here next week, Wednesday, 2 p.m. Tune in 7 days from today. And then in that time, I came up with a show format, questions, title for the show, logo, and a guest.
I love it, man. Just taking action, right? So you just got
Yep.
motivated, taking action. And one thing that's coming through with your story is you've always been open to coaching. You
Mhm.
had the coaching when you were an agent trying to figure out how to scale. And I think that really helped you have an inflection point. Here we're talking
Well,
about.
I wasn't always receptive to coaching. That was the problem. It's that
Well, I mean, it seems like though when you have those moments of growth, it's when
it
you
was
were
because of
receptive to
coaching.
coaching.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was because I got a heavy dose of humble pie for the first
Mm,
3 years of my business, right? Like
mm.
2008, I still remember filing my 1040, right? Like I pay for an accountant to do my taxes, and my 1040 showed negative 50,000, meaning my expenses exceeded my revenue by $50,000. He's like, I'm sorry, right? But you still have to pay. So yeah, like put his thing on the credit card, right? but like talk about a gut punch. It was because I thought coaching was a scam that I
Mm,
was not susceptible to coaching initially. And it was basically in 2010, it was like put up or shut up. It was like either I figure this out with help or I go back to engineering, which I did not want to do.
yeah, I love that, man. I appreciate the transparency there because I think so many real estate investors, like real estate is one of those things where there are definitely some unsavory characters,
Mhm.
selling coaching or courses or whatever, and don't have that other person's best interest in mind.
Hmm.
So there's a good amount of skepticism and probably
Yeah.
warranted skepticism from
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and investors. But ultimately, coaching was big for me as well, right? It's one of those things where I started off and built my own portfolio, and it got to a point where what I was doing was working, but not fast enough and not effective enough, and that
Mhm.
didn't hit me until the company I was working for ended up going into bankruptcy, and I had to look around and say, all right, I got on the right path, but I still don't have enough passive income to cover all my bills. Like I need a different strategy, right? And
Yeah.
I need to figure out how to do this a little bit differently. So I think coaching can absolutely be critical. However, I think for people like you and I and some of our listeners, there kind of has to be a trigger, right? Something that
Hmm.
pushes you to say, hey, that someday maybe we'll think about it or we'll just stay on the path and see what happens. We got to make it happen now. We need to find
Hmm.
help. And, when you're able to do that, particularly if you can find people to help you solve the specific challenges and needs that you're facing, it can lead to explosive growth because anything that you've seen, any challenge, somebody else has already faced in real estate, whether it's not enough money, not enough deals, not enough investors, no knowledge on how to execute. People have already faced that. They've already solved it, and
Yeah.
there's systems out there and there are people. So if you could find the right people, they can help you out. Let's kind of go back to the podcast, right? Because again, you
Mhm.
were part of this group, you were at this event, you decided on a Saturday, you know what, I'm going to launch this podcast. Wednesday, you tell people tune in next week. That Wednesday, you launch the podcast. You've gotten hundreds and hundreds or hundreds of thousands of downloads,
Mhm.
now monthly. So you're getting a ton of downloads, lots of
Yeah.
people who are learning from you, and you've been able to help individuals through this platform. Did you expect to have that kind of growth or that kind of
No,
response when
not
you
at all.
launched the podcast? Talk to me more
Not
about
at
kind
all.
of what that's like for you.
So I was hopeful that it would do well. I was hopeful because I already had a successful business, but I wasn't known outside of the Phoenix market, Phoenix realtor market. Outside of that, I wasn't really known, right? I was not a known commodity. So I was hoping that would help me build my brand on top of that because I already done the investment, in personal development, and growth and success and all those other things, but I didn't know, right? And so basically, I went into it. I started fast, but I also gave myself a rule, which was if after 10 episodes this completely bombs, I'm going to cancel it, right? And here's the thing with the podcast. This is a story I told myself, and hopefully, this will help some of the listeners. If I launch a podcast and it bombs, the great thing about that bomb is that no one knows because they didn't download it, right? They had no idea about the podcast. It clearly didn't catch their attention. So either it succeeds because they know about it, or it fails and no one knows about it. So for me, I gave myself a quick start, and B, permission to fail. And if it bombs, like, look, I've got plenty of things that I've tried that were stupid ideas that I thought were going to be genius moments. Like this is going to put me on the map, and it did absolutely nothing. So it just would just be one more thing I've done that didn't work, and that's okay.
And I love that you gave yourself permission to fail and focused on a quick start, which is you didn't overthink it. You didn't take 2 months of planning and try to map out 100 different things before you launched. You said, you know
Hmm.
what, let me get what I need. Let me figure this thing out. Let's run. We'll build it as we go. We'll modify it, but let's go. Let's just have a quick start. But that permission to fail allows you to not put so much pressure on the result and the outcome. And I would say if
Yeah.
I can add one thing, that for someone else who's listening to this, one other thing to add to maybe the two you have the quick start and permission to fail is also what, my one of my mentors, Joe, he calls it, Joe Fairless calls it a 50-50 rule or 50-50 goal. And what that means is half of the benefit comes from just doing it, right? Just being
Mhm.
on the journey. So yes, you want it to blow up, have a lot of downloads, be successful, reach a big audience.
Yeah.
but half of it is just from doing it, right? And that could be just from the conversations you're having with people you otherwise wouldn't be talking to. It could be from the information you're gaining from that, right? It could just be to put
Mhm.
yourself out there and to get more comfortable speaking in a different platform. But if half of the goal or half of the value comes from just doing it and being on that journey, then those are the goals that are going to get you more inspired because no matter if anyone listens to it, literally if zero downloads, you're like, I just had a great conversation with Steve. I don't know if anybody
Yeah.
else is going to hear this conversation, but Steve and I just had a great conversation. Maybe this is a new relationship that can get sparked and we can do something together. But if you think about it and approach it from that perspective, there really is no failure. I mean, yeah, you want
Right.
it to reach more people, but if you can
Yeah. We saw
walk
the
away
vanity
saying I had a
metrics,
great
but
conversation, yeah, exactly,
yeah, the vanity
exactly.
metrics don't pay the bills.
Exactly, exactly. I love it, man. So you've got a coaching program now, right? You have a sales
Mhm.
coaching. You help other people learn how to be more effective. Tell us more about the kind of investors, the kind of people that you're working with to help them see more success in their business.
Yeah. So the people that we're talking to are people that are having conversations that directly impact their bottom line, right? So if you're talking to homeowners or you're talking to, someone that you're trying to raise capital from, if you're trying to talk to landlords who want to sell their property to you, these are all high stakes conversations. And so I didn't plan on actually getting into sales training. Like there was no like at one point I was like, I'm for sure gonna be a sales trainer. I mean, there was a point in my career where I hired pushy salespeople because I was so bad at sales. Right? Like I'll take care of the marketing, you guys go close them, right? But at some point, somewhere along the way, talking about more coaching, I found a sales coach. Right? This is 2018, right around the same time I started the podcast, right after I started the podcast, and he's a sales coach, right? And as I was learning from him, what I was able to do with his help was basically reverse engineer sales, So like I was an engineer. Engineers are not good at sales. Like they're not, we're not wired to be salespeople. And so I was able to take everything that all the human psychology component of why sales works and then give it a name, give it a process, label it, give it a script, give it the dynamics, and the it's been incredibly rewarding for the people that have gone through our programs that they've become more successful. I've had someone say they're able to buy their dream car, right? I've heard people to be able to take these awesome vacations. Um, and the probably the best one, which might not sound great like on a stat sheet, is we had someone say like my wife has said that I've become a better husband,
Mm,
right? Because he knows how to listen now. Because that's what we talk about, like how to actually understand the other person's objective so that you can give them what they want. Like that's really like, let me figure out what John wants exactly, and I'll sell him that. Right. And so that's what we talk about. And we took all the things that we think are natural, charisma, this and that. We boiled it down, simplified it to its most basic parts, first principles, and then we teach those principles.
I love it, Steve. I mean, I think it's so powerful too because for you being an engineer, not being a sales guy, outsourcing that and then realize, you know what, let me actually learn how to do this the right way.
Mhm.
And I think it's helpful because sometimes we get caught up, right? And it's like, oh well, of course this guy's a natural salesperson because they're charismatic, they've got a big personality. And
Yeah.
some people don't have that. It's something I
Mhm.
struggle with starting out because I'm a marketer, right? So I know how to talk to people at a high level, but
Mhm.
I don't do the hard sales, right? And I never got comfortable doing that. And it took some time to just learn that, you don't have to do it that way, right? It's really not even
All
about
right.
you. It's about the other person. It's
Yeah,
about
it has
what they're
nothing to do
looking
with you.
for. Yeah. I mean, all you're doing is listening, trying to understand what this person is looking for,
Hmm.
understand what challenges they face, concerns they have, and then having a conversation from there and that sales training can help so many individuals. If folks
100%.
are interested, I know you have the book, you've got the course and information that you have. So closemoresales.com is where you can go to get more information.
Hmm.
So check that out. We'll make sure to put a link to that in our show notes. You talk to so many individuals in regards to kind of sales. You talked about the high stakes conversations, right? You're a multifamily investor talking to a broker, talking to an owner. You are a wholesaler agent trying to get a listing or trying to acquire this property. What's one of the biggest mistakes that we make, investors, folks on the acquisition side of that sales table, what's one of the
Mhm.
biggest mistakes we make when approaching those other contacts?
The biggest mistake I would say probably is having any kind of preconceived notions about what their objectives are. Uh, we believe in coming in with a perfectly blank slate. Um, you get this thing where you hear like, buyers are liars and sellers are worse. Well, there's a couple of different things that are happening here, right? Because I don't believe that statement. A couple of things that happen. First, we believe that we know what their objectives are, but you and I, we both know we've done enough transactions. Everyone's objective is different. Everyone handles the same exact circumstance differently, right? So I think A, we got to remove any kind of preconceived notions, and then B, if we're removing the preconceived notions, our features and benefits are entirely irrelevant to the conversation. I have to figure out what you want. And then I have the responsibility of figuring out how I can cater my solution to solve all the things you want, right? For John, it's really important that A, B, C, and D. That's it. Those are the four things that are really important to John. Okay, great. How can I present my offer or my solution in such a way that we can take care of A, B, C, and D? That's it. So no preconceived notions. Get rid of your features and benefits. Listen to the other person, understand them, and give them that.
I love it. Great points there, right? Just really understanding what the other individual is looking for. Don't walk into it with preconceived notions.
Mhm.
Listen and then understand how to address those concerns or questions. That's going to set you up to have more success in any
Yeah.
kind of sales situation. Again, if you want to learn more about this, go to closemoresales.com and check out Steve and his company's information there. Right now, we're going to transition to our round of insights.
Yeah.
Steve, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
A failure. Let's see. I've always struggled to call things failures. I would say probably something's always been in the back of my mind was I had the opportunity to buy all the real estate in Phoenix, like really like all the real estate in Phoenix, right? When during the crash, because there was infinite amounts of hard money loans out there. And everything cash flowed, even at 18%. Like you paid 2 points and 18%, everything still cash flowed in 2008, right? So I would say that I wouldn't say I've succeeded on this yet, but I am looking forward to the next crash because we are going to feast in the next crash.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
You said digital or mobile?
Mhm.
Let's see. This is gonna sound excessively basic, but Audible. I believe if you're in the car, you should be listening to something to get better. So now I have learned since, remember talking about failed leadership, I got really down on one of my agents who would never listen to audiobooks in her car. So if you're a 100% visual person, like this advice does not apply to you, right? If you're 100% visually based, you're not audio based in any way, like this advice doesn't work. It took a long time to figure that out. You need to sit down and read. But fortunately, I am an audio based person. And so Audible is like the best thing because you can consume so many books from so many wise people. I go through a book a week. I don't say that to brag. It's just the reality is I have a lot of time in the car. And so I'm always listening to something.
Speaking of books, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
In the last year, I would say Rigging the Game. It's by Dan Nicholson. It's not a very popular book, but it was a book that taught me how to restrain myself. It's the reason why I've been, slowly closing some of these businesses. The core focus here is figuring out, much like, Kiyosaki's freedom number, he talks about like figuring out what's important to you and then build everything in your business to hit that target. So, at a high level, we all have this tendency to chase more doors, more sales, more downloads, more, and for myself personally, more businesses. And really what he talks about is like, if you can just focus on hitting exactly what you need to get, then life will be a lot simpler. And then along the way, when you have less noise, big opportunities will come along that you can choose whether you want to take advantage of it or not. Right. So There was something I was saying a couple weeks ago. Firefighting shrouds opportunities. If we're deep in the weeds, taking care of issues, firefighting, awesome deal comes along, we're gonna completely miss it. We're not even gonna see it, right? Because our heads down taking care of stuff. We're not reading the landscape at all times.
I love that. Give me your number one insight for being an effective closer in sales.
The number one insight is, I would say, seek to serve, right? Validate the other person. At the end of the day, every human being's deep, deep desire is to be seen. That's it.
Love it. Yeah. I skipped over one of my questions. What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I would say listening to Darren daily. So Darren Hardy is one of my mentors. I paid him a lot of money over the years as well. Every morning when I take my kids to school, we listen to Darren Hardy together for the Darren Daily. And so they have to listen on in the car with me. And after they listen to it, they need to summarize in their words what the lesson was. And if they can't, then we need to re-listen to the lesson. So they know they have to pay attention. And so my kids now, like they're 11 and 12, the 12 is going to be 13 in just a matter of days. They hold me accountable. So if I'm violating the personal development lessons that they're learning alongside me, they call me out on it. And, you want to get better, give people around you permission to hold you accountable. My kids hold me accountable.
I love that, man. I love it. Great insights right there. You are in Phoenix. Lots of options here, but give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
My favorite place, it's Mastro City Hall. Anytime we have a really good month, that's where my wife and I go, and we got to get the tomahawk steak, right? It's just a massive piece of steak. It looks like something from the Flintstones, That's our go-to spot.
I love it, man. Steve, great insights today. You talked about kind of your background coming from the engineering world, being an electrical engineer, really getting into real estate as an agent first, struggling out of the gate back in 2007, finally figuring out, okay, I need some help. You take on some coaching, learn to transition from being a real estate agent to a business owner that sells real estate. And then from that opportunities, getting more listings, getting more opportunities, and ultimately launching into wholesaling before, ultimately getting into your podcast, helping other people, and now focusing on sales training where you help people through your platform, closemooresales.com. I loved hearing you talk about just how you were reluctant to get into coaching, particularly because you saw it as a scam. And ultimately, you really kind of had to force yourself to do it because you knew you needed help. And the alternative was going back into the engineering field. So sometimes we get pressured into doing something that maybe we're not comfortable doing, but through those opportunities, that's usually when we have our biggest breakthrough. So I appreciate you sharing that and also giving us some tips on how to be better sales individuals, how to do a better job of closing sales, and just being better listeners. Again, if you want to check out more about Steve, go to closemooresales.com. Steve, thank you for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.